Everyone knows that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, but there are many unknown things about Mount Everest's history. How did Mount Everest get its name? Who was this Everest that Mount Everest is named after? And is Everest even the right pronunciation of his name? Questions, questions, questions. Luckily, we got answers. In today's video, I want to tell you about this genius Indian mathematician who was the first person to identify Mount Everest as the tallest mountain in the world and accurately calculate its height. And it's kind of a travesty that the mountain is not named after this Indian guy, because George Everest, whom Mount Everest was named after, had never set foot on Mount Everest. He had never even seen the mountain during his lifetime. So let's find out about this mathematical genius who discovered Mount Everest, and let's find out why his name was erased from the pages of history. So one day there was a moment of high drama in this boring government office in the beautiful Indian town of Dehradun. A young Indian mathematician burst open the doors of his boss and said, "Sir, I have discovered the tallest mountain in the world." That man was Radhanath Sikdar, and he was recognized by the British as being a mathematical genius. In fact, George Everest once said about Radhanath Sikdar, "In terms of mathematical capabilities, there are few in India, whether native born or English, who can even compete with him." So what was Radhanath Sikdar doing for the British government? This goes back to 1802. The East India Company is getting firmly established in India, and they want to develop this real detailed understanding in India. How tall are the mountains? How deep are the rivers? How big is this country? Where is Mowgli? Because it's only once when you really get an understanding of the measurements of the country, then you can exploit it in the best possible way. And so they used trigonometry to achieve this. This project was called the Great Indian Trigonometrical Survey. And here's how it worked. India is a large country. It's very hard to measure it accurately. So what the British decided to do was they broke it down into a bunch of smaller triangles. Then they would measure each triangle and then add everything up to get an understanding of the whole picture. This process is called triangulation. And here's how they did it. So they first went to Madras, where it was like flat ground, and they drew a line. Then they had these really heavy, super accurate telescopes called theodolites. So you have the baseline, then you go to the peak of the first mountain, and then using a theodolite, you can measure the angle between the 2 points. Now using basic trigonometry, then you can measure the distance between these 2 points. Then you take the theodolite, the peak of the first mountain, and then you use that as the base to measure future points, and so on and so forth. And then these calculations were given to people who were amazingly good at math, so they could calculate stuff. And these people were called computers. And Sikdar was the head computer in India. And during the process of measurement, Sikdar established that Peak 15, which was later to become Mount Everest, was the tallest mountain in India. It wasn't easy for Sikdar to come up with this calculation. He had to contend with two massive variables. First is the curvature of the Earth's surface. Now the Earth is curved, and as it goes further away from you, it stoops downward. So that means you can't get the accurate calculation of a mountain. But the Earth curved away. So Sikdar had to provide a mathematical correction. Now the air is cold and dense at higher altitudes, and this makes the air refract towards the Earth, which makes the mountain appear taller than it really is. So Sikdar had to apply another mathematical coefficient for correction called K, which he would subtract to get the true height of a mountain. So using these advanced techniques, Sikdar was able to calculate that the height of Mount Everest was 29,000 feet. And he went and told this boss, "Hey boss, the height, peak 15 is 29,000 feet, and it is the tallest mountain in the world." And his boss said, "Hold on, Sikdar, we can't go around announcing that the mountain is 29,000 feet. That's too perfect a round number." So they added a couple of feet just to make the number look more credible. Now this brings a question, why was the mountain named Mount Everest? Mount Everest is close to India, China, Nepal, and Tibet, and there were many local names for the mountain. Chomolungma, Sagarmatha, Zumulangma Feng. There was this guy called Waugh who took over from George Everest, and he said, "You know what, I'm just going to name the mountain after my predecessor." And to his credit, George Everest said, "Do not name the mountain after me. It cannot be written easily in a local language. Give it a local name." But Waugh just went with the name, and over the years, the word Everest changed to Everest, which is how we know the mountain today. But if they wanted to go with a local name, they could have called it Mount Sikdar, which is a name that can be written easily in local languages. Now, why did that not happen? Sikdar is what you would call a rebel. He was tired of the casteism in Hinduism and he adopted the mantra of beer, boxing, and beef. Now, beer and beef are obvious because, Hinduism frowns upon doing both these things, and boxing because the British said that the Indian men were emasculated. And Sikdar said, I'm going to show you. And so he adopted beer, boxing, and beef. And this rebellious streak to his personality was what really pissed off the British. There was a superintendent, at the time, the head of the Calcutta Observatory was this guy called Thulia. And Thulia had come up with this method for weather forecasting called time ball signaling. And because Sikdar was such a genius in math, he said, hey, you know what? Your method is deeply flawed. And Thulia didn't like what he said. And then there was his district magistrate called Vansittart, who, when they visited Dehradun, he made Sikdar's team members carry his luggage and call them coolies. And now, Sikdar was big into boxing. He seized the luggage of Vansittart and he flung it on the ground. And for this, he was fined. And there was a lot of press coverage. So the British said, hey, you know what? The Sikdar guy might be good in math, but he doesn't treat us with the right amount of deference. And so he fell out of favor with the establishment and his name was erased from the pages of history. I hope you enjoyed this fascinating story of how the height of the world's tallest mountain was measured and how it got its name. If you like videos on Indian history, mythology, or Buddhism, please consider subscribing for this channel. I hope you have a great week and enjoy the next 7 days that lie ahead. Bye.